The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, we offer our thanks for the food that we have received and for the opportunity that we have to be together. Draw our hearts to you, we pray. Guide our minds, fill our imaginations, control our wills that we may be wholly yours, utterly dedicated unto you. And then use us as you will and always to your glory and to the welfare of your people. Through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, good evening and welcome. I am glad that y'all are here and that we can spend this Wednesday evening together. Just one announcement. If you have not yet had an opportunity to purchase tickets to the garden party, tonight is your night. And there's a table set up back at the back, and Jacqueline will be happy to help you. May the 28th, and as some of you already know, that is one of the significant ways that we reach outside of ourselves and provide some funding for various outreach opportunities this year. All the funds are going to 3 different parishes in the city that provide food for those who are experiencing food insecurity. So I hope you'll come. It's a wonderful night of fun and fellowship that always goes to good cause. Let me get up here on this side because I'm going to sit down with him in just a moment. But before I sit down with him, it gives me a lot of pleasure to be able to introduce to you all a friend of mine and a former colleague, Dr. Paige Walley, and his wife Terry Walley, who is here with him tonight as well. Paige and I were colleagues a few years ago when we were working together for a large nonprofit in Kansas. And we have maintained some contact, and he was gracious enough to come from, actually from Louisville today, but from the state of Tennessee, to be with us tonight to help talk about how it is that you incorporate and integrate faith into your professional life. And he has a varied background and has done a lot of things. He's a graduate of Davidson University and the University of Georgia, which I try not to hold against him. But he's also a very big University of Tennessee fan. That's a little bit harder for me not to hold that against him. Paige is a licensed clinical psychologist. He is an ordained minister, and he has over 20 years of public service, dedicated public service. He currently serves as a state senator in he's a state senator in the state of Tennessee, and he has also served in the House there for 10 years. He is a very accomplished and experienced executive working with a number of organizations that serve children and families.
Oh. This is my
And he was the Commissioner of Human Resources in the state of Alabama and the Commissioner for Children's Services in the state of Tennessee. He and Terry have 3 children, 4 grandchildren, and again, Paige has just had his fingers and hands in lots of different things. And so I thought, as we're thinking about what it means, again, to try to incorporate and integrate faith into our lives and into professional lives, that he would be someone that we might enjoy talking to and listening to. So we have agreed for me to tee him up with a few questions, but as you can probably imagine, between his role as being a politician and the clergy, talking is not really going to be much of an issue for him. So, Paige, welcome to St. Peter's.
Thank you.
And Terry, welcome. Thank you for
Thank you so much.
So, Paige, why don't we start why don't you say just a little bit about, you do have a varied background as someone who has a PhD in psychology, and you still teach psychology, and he teaches psychology as an adjunct at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Say a little bit about, how it is that you developed all of these various interests and how you got to where you are at this stage and time of your life.
David, thank you so much. And thank you all, the congregants of St. Peter's, for having Terry and me here with you today. First of all, I want to commend you on your very wise, prudent selection of Lisa to come and minister to you and bring David with her.
I told you he was a politician.
I so enjoyed working with David. As he mentioned, we worked with a nonprofit in Kansas that was primarily focused on the well-being of children and families, particularly children that were wards of the state, were being removed because of abuse and neglect, coming into out-of-home care and needing to be loved and placed and nurtured. David, I guess, the way I kind of conceptualize why I do what I do, we were talking at our table, I was raised in a tiny little cotton farming community called LaGrange, Tennessee, that was on the Mississippi state line. We had about 100 people, but everybody farmed. My mom and dad had land. My dad didn't farm. He leased the land, but he was in the cotton business. So I grew up in this little town, and it was kind of the have and have-nots. It was more like a Mississippi Delta town, because where we lived in Tennessee, outside of Memphis, it looked a lot like that. I had the privilege of going off to college and leaving the little community, and during my journey, I found out not everybody lived just like this. There were a lot more opportunities out there that so many people seem to have that our little community, our area didn't have. And that began to kind of get into me, and beginning to think, gee, I wish my friends, I went to school, high school with, grew up with, would have these same kind of opportunities. I met Terry when I was interning at the Miami VA Medical Center after my psychology graduate training, and she was kind enough to marry me and follow me, and I began to feel this real sense of wanting to move back toward home and do something. I didn't know exactly what, but I'd begun to take an interest in politics a bit, and it kind of got stirred even more when, as Terry and I moved to the hills of West Virginia. She was crying all the way there, but she came. It was like that old show, Green Acres, you remember. So, she came. But one of the things I began to realize real quickly in running this community mental health center is that I was always being told, well, the state won't let you do this, or the state won't let you do that, or if the policies change with the state, the financing the state gave for mental health services was better, we could do. And I began to think, I'm not exactly sure who the state is, but I sure would like to be there, because it seems that what opportunities are being generated are coming from decisions being made there. In Charleston, West Virginia in this case, but then soon we moved back to Tennessee, where I took a similar job to our little community where I'd grown up, and that began to really impress me again, because you either did one of two, there were two career paths you took in my area. You farmed, which was way too hard, to me, or you went into working at the state psychiatric hospital. That was the other big employer in our area. So I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work there, but it was the state again. And I finally said, well, I'm just going to do something. I'm going to try to run and be part of this, because I think if we could do that, we might could have some better roads, better schools, more employment. Our area was just hemorrhaging people. Everyone wanted to move, go to Nashville, go to St. Louis, go to somewhere else for opportunities. Unless you were the landowners, and the family of the landowners, and you were working for them. That was about your only choices. So that's kind of what precipitated some of why I decided to get into politics. I was fortunate enough to be elected. During that time I was in Miami that I referenced, I was involved with a large, this will sound really strange to my Episcopalian friends here, it was a large Baptist church, but it was the most un-Baptist Baptist church you've probably ever seen. And it was multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual, headed by this very loving guy that had come from Texas. And Miami was a melting pot then. There was no ethnic majority then. There were Latinos, and there were African Americans, and there were Caucasians, and so it worked. He asked me to run the counseling ministry for that church. That was my first real job. And so getting a sense of the needs there, the state and what it could do to help kind of got me to where I wanted to go about a career in helping my community, helping my people. And I'll just tell you one quick story. This little town, LaGrange, Tennessee, I tell this story regularly. If you were to drive in there when I was growing up, back in the 1960s, early 70s, and you stopped at one of the little stores there, people would likely ask you a question. And it wouldn't be what you would typically think. They wouldn't say, well, where are you from? They would say, who are your people? Who are your people? Who do you belong to? So I could say, well, my people are John and Betty Walley. They live down here on Highway 57. Well, that's how I still think of the Senate district I represent. 8 very rural counties, very challenged in many of the ways I shared earlier, but they're my people. And so it's just a delight to be able to say, in my mind anyway, God is using me in this role. I mean, I really, David, I'm talking like you're not having to ask me questions. You're right about that.
I knew this would happen.
I really kind of, in my faith walk, look at God having ordained 3 institutions. Marriage, the church, and government. And I think we have a responsibility as Christians to be prayerful about our government, to participate in it, however that looks. And so that's just kind of where I found my area of ministry. When I was younger, I thought, oh God, please don't call me to be a missionary in Africa. I don't want to do that. So I feel good about maybe where He's called me to with this.
So you've been involved in, as you refer to it, as seeing the state. You've been involved in the state in different ways. As an elected official, which obviously you still are, but also in a different way as an appointed official. Commissioner of Human Resources and Human Services in Alabama? In Alabama, it's called Human Resources, but that everybody really thinks of Human Resources as hiring, firing employees. That's not it. It should have been called Human Services. It was all of the child protective services, adult protective services, food security issues, the child daycare, all of those things. And then in Tennessee, a similar role, right? So how is it that you have been able, you think, to put your talk into action? How have you been able to really live into who you feel you are as a person of faith with the demands and the expectations of government that are sometimes very different? Well, I think one of the things that has impressed me in my role in the executive branch of government as a commissioner over our Department of Children's Services, let's say in Tennessee, and then as an elected official in the executive branch, is that these folks I work with in government, very few get in it for the money, because if you do, you're silly. That's not where you're going to be, really able to make the kind of living that so many think of when they think of having the, really nice home and the vacation place at the lake or the beach or that kind of thing. So I think I really see so many people feeling like it's a calling on their life, and that in Tennessee, for instance, one of the things I love about our legislature, on our Senate side, and our House does this similarly,
We start every one of our legislative sessions, every one, with a prayer led by an invited clergy member. And then we have a pledge to the flag. And then we have what's called a salute to the Tennessee state flag. It's kind of like a pledge, but it's just, one of the things I really love about that is you acknowledge, your place in this system, that God is the head of this, that our people in our state and our nation and our state are the ones we're serving. So we're serving God, we're serving our citizens, we're serving our people, and that's why we're here. In Tennessee, a state senator, we're considered a part-time legislature. Maybe it's the same here in Missouri. So we're there from mid-January to late April. Kind of coincides with the farmers, the agrarian system where this was initiated, where you were just getting ready for planting season, so there wasn't as much going on, but you need to finish up by about now and get back to the fields. We make about $25,000 a year. So you see, if I tell my wife I'm really making it, honey, it's not going to be there. So she's very tolerant. Now, we all have other positions, other jobs. I was in Louisville today working my regular job. Drove here from Louisville. But David, back to your question, I just see so much compassion of people on taking care of the needs of those in the community. I had one thing that just really impacted me last week. I was the commissioner of the Department of Children's Services in Tennessee, which is responsible for all of the investigations of abuse, neglect, etc. And all too often, when that's found to be occurring, we're having to remove these children, place them in out-of-home care, and try to provide for them. But sometimes the tragedy is we never get the chance because the abuse is so severe and they're so young. We had a child last week, and I was getting ready to speak to a Lions Club meeting in Lawrence County, Tennessee. And if a child from your district dies in state care or custody, you're alerted as a legislator, so you know. And just before I went on to speak, I got this alert that a 4-month-old child who'd been, parents were fentanyl addicts, and maltreated. She was born with a variety of anomalies, died in the hospital after 4 months, and she had a name. And it just impressed me to share with these Lawrence Counties. I said, this is one of our people, that just died. And I want us to be prayerful for her. I want us to be thinking, and in some ways now, while we grieve over that, celebrating that she's now in the arms of a loving God. And I'll just share with you, I'm a person that believes, and I pray to, my people that have gone on before me, that they'll, be active in the heavenlies. That my mother will say, embrace this child, that she'll be praying to our Lord to touch her and welcome her. So there are a lot of people of faith that I get to interact with, and it is so wonderful. And I find that when we're tempted to be cynical about so much of government, that there's so much good out there. At least I can see it at our state level and our local level so many times. And David, I'm rambling again, but that's just kind of with the executive branch stuff. It was wonderful to be able to hire and support the leadership and the staff that would then look after and advocate for these children and these families and try to protect the kids, try to reunify them when it was possible. And that's what David and I were doing together in Kansas, in that not-for-profit, is trying to work with the state of Kansas to provide some of that. But it's one of the things that I really love about this job is not the getting to stand in the Capitol and debate legislation, but it's to do the constituent services work. It's to do the grassroots stuff. Because I'm called every day. I was called twice at our hotel after we checked in a couple hours ago. by people who are saying, we've got to have some help with this issue, with that issue for, my mother is in the hospital and this procedure is not going to be covered by the Medicaid plan, or it could be anything. I mean, you can, I can tell you funny ones, I can tell you sad ones, but it's wonderful to be able to know that if you call me, I can get you an answer pretty quickly. Yes, no, maybe, here's part of it, not all of it, not yet. But I know I've learned where to go, who to connect with. If you call, to Jefferson City and you try to get something, just from an agency. I had one today, as Terry and I were driving up here, that this lady's son is going on, I forgot what it was, but he hadn't got his real ID. Y'all have to be doing that too? Can you help? It's now, I hate to say it, but if you call our Department of Transportation and say, I'm John Doe, can you help me with my real ID? You'll probably get in a voicemail loop and never to be seen again. I can usually find the right person, at least say, yes, we can, no, we can't. And that's the wonderful thing about this job, too. That's what I like, somebody who's advocating for our folks. I was reading a little bit before I came over, thinking about this message, or thinking about this theme that you all have about faith and service, and was just that 21st chapter of the book of John, where you remember Jesus is sitting by the fireside, and he has a conversation with Peter, who's denied him 3 times, and he begins the conversation, hey, Peter, do you love me? And you remember what he asked him when Peter says, yes, I love you? Take care of my sheep. Here's what, if you do, here's what you're going to do. Take care of my lambs, feed my sheep. And I don't know, that seems to be something that in the area that I've been fortunate enough to find myself in, I have an opportunity to do that, and I can see it, and I can sense it, that I'm at least maybe walking in the plan God has for me.
So, you mentioned cynicism, and there does seem to be quite a bit of that, but also without getting partisan anyway, but there also just is a lot of division. Local level, state level, as a people, we seem to be going through a time when we are just very often very polarized. Say a little bit about how do you deal with that? How do you handle that? What's your approach to that? And what are some of your thoughts about where we are and is there hope for us?
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'll tell you, I had a conversation again. Terry and I were driving over from Louisville. Had a friend that is I happen to be a Republican in our Senate. A lot of the Republicans don't think I'm a good Republican, and that's okay. I come from an area, and one of the things we always say is we represent our district. My district doesn't look like a lot of districts. I have a large number of folks who are Democrats, a large number of African Americans, and I never, ever talk about partisan stuff. Never am out banging the drum, for just this is the way. I never ask anybody who they voted for. I never ask anybody, what their affiliation with is. When I was growing up, the area where I grew up, everybody was a Democrat. That was one of those old-time conservative, squeeze every nickel, and good, godly people. And that's the thing that I really love about my area, and where I think there's hope is Democrats, Republicans, we share so much more in common than we share, than have our differences. Now I know that there are some stark outliers in that, but I think of, you remember, anybody ever kind of take statistics or anything like that? You remember the normal distribution of the curve, where about 85% of it is in the middle. I think most of us are purple when you really get down to it. There's very few bright blues and bright reds. There's some, they're usually the loudest, and that's okay, you know, have at it. But I really think that I see there being a lot of hope in our body if we just, and we do in our Senate. It doesn't happen in our House, I'm going to tell you that. If it happens in our Senate, we try to let everybody speak. Nobody is to be humiliated. Everybody is to try to be given an opportunity to save face. You know, sometimes there are people that have legislation I just adamantly don't agree with, and I'll go up to them and I'll say, if this was different, I could support it. But I'm going to be a quiet no. I'm going to vote against it. I'm not going to speak against it. If there's something really I object to, I would speak against it. But we try to be a little more courteous. And maybe that's because we're an older group on the Senate side than our House side. We joke a lot that the Senate is like a nursing home, the House is like a kindergarten. It's just two different cultures. But you know, we're more contemplative and you know and have deeper relationships. There are fewer of us, so you can do that. But David, I think that we have allowed in our political dialogue for something terrible to happen, and that is for a word compromise to be seen as something dirty. That, you know, this is right and that's wrong. And not only is that wrong, but you're evil for even believing that. And I'm not looking at anybody, but we had a very famous statesman that you'll remember from Tennessee named Senator Howard Baker. He was a majority leader at one time. He, I think, ended up being the chief of staff for President Reagan in his second term. But he said something that I think I've taken, and a lot of people have learning more, take to heart, and that is, you know, sometimes the other guy just might be right. You need to approach things like that. It just might be right. And I think the way to get at it, David, too, is for us to get any two feuding groups together. There has to be some kind of, one of my psychology courses taught us was a superordinate goal. That is, there's got to be something bigger that can only be achieved with you two collaborating. All right? It's not going to be done with either side doing what they want to do. There's got to be something bigger. We see that when there are crises, when there are the 9/11s, when there are other things. People come together and we rally and then we drift apart. So we're constantly trying to find those things that we can only achieve by trying to collaborate. One of those, and this is going to sound extraordinarily boring to you, but we have real infrastructure problems in Tennessee. With all the good going on there, our roads are in very bad condition. Roads here in St. Louis aren't that great, I found. I felt a little better about my roads in Tennessee. But our water systems, our wastewater systems are very antiquated. We're very proud. We brag about the fact that we're the lowest tax state per capita in the country. We have the lowest indebtedness per capita in the country. We have fully funded state employee and teacher pension plans. We've got a $2.5–3 billion rainy day fund. But then we let stuff go. I told someone, it's like you come into my house and the roof's falling in and I'm bragging about how much money I have in the bank. We're just, we're not smart right now. So that's what we're making that kind of our big goal. We're going to solve this issue, God willing, of this infrastructure rebuild. But we're not going to do it with just Republicans, doing it or Democrats doing it, because we can't do it. So, anyways, just trying to find something that is unusually challenging to bring us together, and to have some people that have the courage to say, no, enough of this. We're not, we had a couple of issues this year where we had some of my colleagues in our Republican side that were just way out of line with what was wise to do with issues around immigration, and kids. And several of us voted no, and it still passed in the Senate, but we got it beaten in the House. So you start to push back on a little of that too when you got to. And that's why sometimes I get called, well, you're not loyal enough. I wasn't elected to be loyal, I was elected to represent my district, and that's what I'm going to do.
So, right now we also hear a lot about where it is that politics and the church, or politics and Christianity, should or should not intersect. And sometimes as clergy, we have to kind of find ways to manage those types of things. Say a little bit about that, about how you see them coming together, and where is the dividing line?
And that's such a great question. And I see religious leaders on both sides, of issues at times, and very, very vocally so. I had kind of a guy that I followed when I was up and coming and trying to learn more about how I should approach these kind of things. And he was a pastor of a big church in San Antonio, Texas. And he said something like, pastors and those in the clergy need to be bold enough to speak, in support of the state at times, against the state at times, but never as the state. Never we're a part of that instrument, and I think there's a real role for people of faith, and in the Christian community, I'll say in particular right now, to be people of great prayer. That's the easy part in some ways, but sometimes we overlook that, how important that is. But to speak into the lives of your elected officials, we've got one guy in our legislative complex that his whole ministry is he is there, and he's coming from office to office, asking if he can pray for you and your family. He'll have a Bible study, and it is powerful. I mean, humble guy, it is powerful. It is influential. I think it's very important that you participate avidly, whatever your persuasion is, in your government. Not only voting, but supporting candidates that you believe in. I think at the same time we need to do that with a sense of great humility and not with arrogance. That again, the other guy might be right, but this person represents my convictions, and we need to be willing to say that. If someone is off, be it on your side or the other side, I think that needs to be lifted up, because we do that, and we need that. And I would really encourage you to, if you don't know your elected officials well, I know most of you probably do, but get to know them. I mean, you'd be surprised at how responsive they'll be if you reach out with an email or a phone call or a letter and just say, I'm praying for you. I'd like to, I don't understand why you voted this way, but I want you to know, I'd like to understand. Those kind of things. You don't have to be threatening at all, and that's very persuasive. And smart people will respond to you. They really will. You're a legislator. Don't bother writing people that aren't your legislators. That's not a good use of your time. But those are yours. Write them, call them. Let them know what you think. Host a little coffee for them sometime to talk to your neighbors about what they believe, why they believe it. I just think that's important. So I think the church, the church, the greater church ought to have that kind of important influence. I don't think we need to say the church is Republican or the church is Democrat, because they're not. They're good, godly people on both sides of that, churches on both sides of that. But I think that level of participation really, you would be encouraged by it. You would get over some of the cynicism to see that people respond to you.
So you live in part of the country still labeled the Bible Belt, but we all know that we're going through and have been going through for quite a while a period of time of decline in church attendance. Churches are closing on a regular basis. Many people don't even identify with the church. We know that there are thousands of vehicles that pass by here every day, and we know that many of them people, if they even look over here, sometimes don't even know what this is or what happens. How do you see those types of things impacting our common life, and especially how it is that we work together and live together as people?
That's something I scratch my head about often too. I see it in our young people. I see it in how they look at marriage now, or don't look at it, and how I'm going to say the collective maybe we haven't walked our faith as we should before people. That makes it something that folks want to be a part of. I've shared with a couple of associates of mine, the hard truth that if what you're walking as your talk is what Christianity is, and why would anybody want to be a part of that? What the hatefulness, the arrogance, but I think so many people are just hungry, really hungry for belongingness, to be a part of my people. I want to be part of something that there's meaning, and I know I'm loved, and I know I'm accepted as I am. And when I say accepted as I am, I mean that as far as we can embrace anybody and bring them in. I think Jesus loves us just as we are, but he loves us too much to leave us that way. He's got bigger plans to mold us and to grow us, and it's not my job, to do the Holy Spirit's work to change you. I'll leave that up to the Lord, but I'll tell you what I believe and invite you in and be a part of things and give you a sense of a place and participation. And I think it's hard for some people. So many people don't know what church is about. They don't know when they drive by this beautiful facility, they don't know that that's a place that would welcome them. I'm sure you would if folks came in. But I think that's part of the plan of the enemy is to divide us and to make us feel like we're alone and to drive us into the silliness of looking at our phones constantly and being disconnected from the people around us. We've got a daughter and a son-in-law right now that are on a spiritual journey, and it's really taken a very different track than how they were raised. And we pray about it. We're hopeful they're going to find their way into, and maybe they're right in some of it. I don't know. Maybe we're looking at some of this wrong. But I think the bottom line is Jesus. And him loving us, and him dying for us, and him saving us, and him wanting more for us, and him wanting to work through us. And boy, that's a message that's just really good. That's really good. And people need to hear more about who Jesus is and what he isn't. That he's not, and God's not this angry fist in the sky waiting to rock your jaw, because you stepped out of line. He came and paid an incredible price for us to seek us and to save us and to, bless us. That's a hard message though to get across to some folks that don't want to hear it and don't want to, and think there's some other motivation for you wanting to, influence them.
So you mentioned loneliness and being alone. Since you said you spend a lot of time out and about with people and talking with people, and from your psychological background, you probably know that we're going through what's now been labeled an epidemic of loneliness. There are people just everywhere who are spending significant amounts of time alone. Share some of your thoughts about that. How do you see that playing out in the different groups that you're with, and again in our common life together?
So interesting you were saying, as we were driving into town this afternoon, winding our way back, my Garmin took me all kind of a circuitous route. But this song, Billy Joel's song, Piano Man, came on. And I was listening to it, and listening to the lyrics of it. And he's talking about these people gathering in a bar. And he says this line, it's pretty haunting. They're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. And I just thought, wow, isn't that true? We're all looking to belong. We're all looking to have that sense of, I'm part of my people group. And you know the line of, you can be in the middle of a crowd and still be lonely. But it is. It's just we are unfortunately, I think, raising a new generation. We look at our grandkids, our kids, and how many times have you been to a restaurant and seen people now sitting around a table, but they're all looking at their iPhone? Isn't it amazing? And we all can be guilty of that. We all are wondering, who's that? Why is it buzzing? Is my daughter calling? Is my son calling? But we have disengaged so much, and I think part of what we have to do, David, is to be willing to invite people to the church to visit, to welcome people when they do, to and I'm not great at it, but inviting people over to the house to eat, to cook out, to engage, and to talk, and to be unafraid to talk. But it is miserable. It is miserable being lonely and alone. And what you're doing right here with making sure that your people are engaged and have opportunities and develop relationships and know what the needs are and where the hurts are, that's tremendous. That's tremendous of building that connectivity. And what I heard you talking about earlier, the ministries you have, reaching out to people where there's the food insecurity and whatnot, and just, generating that empathy. That's so important, and I commend you for it.
So, you've devoted a lot of your professional life to children and families. And kids in foster care, all the different, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of issues. Where are we? What's the state of things with our children and with family structure and in your opinion?
Well, I'm as positive and as optimistic as I try to be and as hopeful as I am in so many things. It is a constant battle with the deterioration we see around us of the family, of the influence of drugs, of anything and everything you can think of. The deterioration of marriage I referenced earlier. We can do all we can do with our Department of Children's Services, or I don't know what it's called in Missouri, but Department of Social Services. It is very hard for folks to put brokenness back together. So very hard. A lot of the best we can do is to try to, throw a lifeline and to, we used to kind of use a metaphor of we're trying to move from standing at the bottom of a waterfall and catching them as they, crash over the falls to getting upstream a little bit before they go over. But one of the things you can do is when you hear these stories in the media about how well, this child died in state custody, in foster care and whatnot. Sometimes that's going to happen. I don't say that to be trite. I just mean that the degree of brokenness and the degree of injury and the degree of challenge that some of these kids come into care with. And then you've got a young workforce, usually young women, just out of college, being asked to try to help with these situations, being paid modestly, being called out at all hours of the night into all kinds of neighborhoods that you wouldn't want your 20-something-year-old daughter traveling in probably in the middle of the night. There's, I think that, just some of the best we can hope for is to do this at our best. Is it better? I don't know. I don't think it's worse, but it's just so hard. It's a battle every day. It's a battle every day to try to keep these children safe and to push back the scourge of fentanyl and other illicit drugs that are wrecking lives, wrecking parents' lives, like the parents of this child I referenced a little while ago. And so you do what you do. You make better policy. You try to secure the border from these kinds of drugs and whatnot, making them in. You try to punish crime. You try to give people second chances. And but I think as people of faith, we understand that our world is broken. And thank God that Christ has come in to seek and to save and to try to to give us every opportunity to break out of that. But we're stiff-necked people, and we want to do it our way. And the wages of sin is still death.
So one more for you. What is there a Bible verse, a Bible passage, a Bible story that has been formational for you and something that has, that you kind of your go-to, that you always, fall back on, and why?
Well, there is. If you give me a little bit of microphone time, I know you've been very generous. I'll tell you, I read a few of them every day. I won't go into too many. And it's not so much Bible stories, although there's some wonderful ones. I love the prodigal son is probably my favorite out of that Luke 15, just the chapter of lost things, and Jesus is speaking to the crowd, and he realizes, this crowd is lost. Tax collectors, sinners, scribes, Pharisees, and then he tells them these three stories about the lost sheep and the lost coin and then the lost son. And that lost son is really about that loving father that, his son is stiff-necked, wants his way, wants his share of the inheritance now, but the dad never gives up on him and runs to him when he sees him coming home, throws his arms around him, ring on his finger, a robe on his back. And then one of the things I loved about that story is that the son has rehearsed a speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you, and no longer worthy to be your son. Make me like one of your hired men. Let me just work out the barn. And he starts that speech, Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you, and no longer worthy, to be called your son. And the father cuts him off. I don't know if you ever noticed that. He just cuts him off and says, bring the best robe, bring the ring, Anyway, that's the story. The verse, I think, is a kind of an obscure one. It's out of the book of Zephaniah. How many of you spend any time in Zephaniah? Chapter 3, verse 17. The Lord your God is with you. He's mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you, with his love. And I think I memorized. I'm butchering it. But look up Zephaniah 3:17. But it's about, and it kind of built around these verses I've gravitated to. It's about God's presence. You know, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. You don't have to worry, I'm with you. And I look at those every day. There's in that Christmas term, Emmanuel, God with us, you know, and then there's a song that talks about we're his people, and there it is again. You know, we are his people, you know, the sheep of his flock. So that's good, but look up Zephaniah 3:17.
Well, Paige, we usually devote just a little bit of time for any questions or comments that anybody has, so I'd like to want to do that and open up the floor if there are any.
If nobody else, I have like 50. Thanks very much. I do. I have 50, but I'll ask one. First of all, if we had 100 of you in the legislature here in Missouri, then we would be so much better off, but we don't. Okay, and I'm not saying Missouri, we don't. And I think what we have is this divisiveness it's, you know, people don't go into it for the money, but sometimes the money takes over. And maybe not so much at this level, but at other levels, it really takes over. But in order to be reelected, nobody's got the backbone to stand up anymore. What they want to do is get reelected, and the ability to be reelected is divide and conquer. So it's so much of us versus them. And what I hear in you is, and I've always said this, that if you've been there, if you've worked with these kids, if you've seen these families, there is no way, okay, to look at those people over there and those people over there and think about dividing and conquering. They're all in the group, and you try to help them. I don't see that in most legislators. I just don't. I see rhetoric. I see divisiveness. I see I'm going to win, judgment. And I think that's what's so wrong in politics. Nobody comes to it with the view that you have, which is I'm trying to help everyone, as opposed to I'm trying to help my friends, or I'm just trying to win. Did you notice that? I can't believe everybody in Tennessee is like you, or else everyone would live there. Okay? Do you notice any of that as well?
Oh yes, yes, sir. We certainly have those that are in it, you know, with the idea of a specific agenda. It may be one that's, you know, this year we're going to be very anti-immigration, because polling shows, you know, so people begin to say, what should we do based on what polls say? And that's very dangerous to me. I get some of it, but you're right. So for people like me who I particularly come out of a district that is full of want and need. We were able to recruit the largest investment in the state's history from private industry 3 years ago, with Ford Motor Companies building their new Ford F-150 Lightning pickup in Brownsville, Haywood County, Tennessee, about 3 hours south of here. We had more rural hospitals closed than any place in the country per capita. We've been reopening hospitals. So remember I was talking about the superordinate goals, healthcare access, employment opportunities, improving our schools, fixing our roads. It's just the basic blocking and tackling, you know, of helping people live their lives, you know, having a safe community, you know, with law enforcement, and having judges that, you know, enforce the law. But you're right, we have, and in my own party, there's a number, you know, that are more comfortable with thinking, how do we keep our numbers up? How do we win? And we do it by just these silly things. And we had one of them this year, and I voted against it. I spoke against it. It won in the Senate. It did not go anywhere in the House. We were able to kind of derail it at least. But you're right. That's so hard. And so if you find somebody that is more of the pragmatic, you know, problem-solving person that you want, please get behind them. Please encourage them. Please support them. Please introduce them to your friends. Please rally around them, because the people, if you don't encourage people like that, the folks that will do it are the ones that will stick their finger in the wind and see which way it's blowing. And you've got them here in St. Louis, we've got them, in Tennessee too, that'll do horrible things and divide. But that's right. So thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. I wish I had a just elegant answer, but I do appreciate it. The Lord your God is with you. He's mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. There it is. That's Zephaniah 3:17.
Now nobody has to look it up.
Right? There's some great verbs in there. There's like 5 of them. But what he does for us.
Anything else for Paige? Any other comments, questions? Paige, this has been a delight.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you for the meal and the hospitality. We really appreciate it. Our plans tomorrow to maybe not set an alarm, but when we get up is head down to Lambert's for some thrown rolls, and then ease on over down to Hayti and then cross the river and back into Tennessee. So get to a grandson's ball game maybe tomorrow night.
Thank you all for being here. Good night. God bless.